right.
All right, well, I'll introduce myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Aaronshield. I work in engineering career services. Welcome to our event this evening, or gosh, I guess it's technically afternoon, but it is our, with the time change, who knows what time it is, but it is our global fireside chat, basically. And so we're just having a little chat tonight with two of our alumni who have had experience going abroad, working abroad, working with global constituents. But I did want to just make a plug before we get started. So every week of the school year, ECS has had a different theme. And so this year, this week is our Global Opportunities Week. And so I know that if you're registered with ECS, which hopefully all of you are that are on the call, you received the ECS Wire just a little bit ago today. And that has some resources for working abroad, interning abroad, the link to Going Global, which is a great resource. If you're an international student that happens to be on the call, there's some guides for international students. And then we also have an event on Tuesday, tomorrow night, for international students as well, where we have alumni and OIA on, as well as a rep from Cummins talking about working in the US as an international student. So make sure to check out that ECS Wire for just all the different kind of opportunities for either international students who want to work in the US or domestic students who are interested in working abroad.
Thanks, Katie. And my name is Aaron Klein. I am the Engineering Abroad Manager. So I work with the Office of International Affairs, as well as with the College of Engineering on developing international programs. Certainly this past academic year has been challenging, to say the least, for international mobility, but we are very pleased to have some wonderful alumni that we've been able to engage with both in the fall and now in the spring to have sort of these intentional conversations that even though we can't physically cross borders, we can still have these meaningful conversations about what is it like to engage in an international sphere, especially in engineering. We know that it is such a global industry. So we have two alumni with us today that we're happy to speak with to just share some of their stories about how they were able to work in the current line that they're in, and hopefully shed some advice to our students that are watching today. So without further ado, Nick and Erica, would you mind introducing yourselves, speak on what your major was here at Ohio State when you graduated, and what your current role is right now at your company? And I'll start with you, Erica.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Erica Brackman. I graduated from Ohio State in 2016 with my bachelor's in chemical engineering. And I currently work for Emerson as a product manager for a line of regulators and valves. So a lot of all that process equipment that runs refineries, various aerospace customers, hydrogen fuel cells, all that kind of stuff. They use our valves and regulators.
Alrighty, good afternoon, everybody. Nick Fernandez. I'm saying hi from the now sunny Dallas, Texas. So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Colombia, South America. I moved to Miami, Florida, halfway through high school. That's where I finished high school. And from Florida, decided to go to cold Ohio State. I actually never toured the campus. So my first day there was at orientation. But I graduated with a bachelor's in electrical and computer engineering in 2018. And then I did the BSMS program that some of the colleges, well, not some of the departments have. So I did my master's. I graduated with that in 2019. After that, I decided to move to Dallas, Texas, like I mentioned, to work for Texas Instruments. And for those of you, I know at least one of you is thinking about it. Do I make calculators? False. I do not make calculators. Texas Instruments is in the integrated circuits business. So we make integrated circuits chips anywhere from Tickle Me Elmo to a Tesla car and everything in between. The product line that I deal with the most is personal electronics and automotive. And I'm in the manufacturing side of Texas Instruments. Yeah, and while at school, I did two service learning trips, the ones offered in spring break. So one of them, I went to Honduras, and the second one, I went to Colombia. So my hometown, not my hometown, but my home country. And yeah, happy to talk to everybody today.
Thank you so much, both, for introducing. I forgot to mention to our student audience, there is a Q&A function in Zoom, so please feel free any time throughout this session to chat your questions in that Q&A. Both Katie and I will be moderating that and bringing your questions to our panelists.
Okay, I may have just missed it, and I'm sorry if I did, but Erica, I know you said you work for Emerson, which when I think of Emerson, I think of Sydney, Ohio. So tell us, why are you on this panel today? Because I don't think of anything global when I think of Emerson.
Yeah, sure. So I have worked in the Sydney, Ohio plant. But so Emerson is a global company. We have over 40,000 different employees in many countries. So I've actually done roles in Singapore and China, as well as in Sydney, Ohio. And now I'm currently in New Jersey. So there's a lot of different offices and a lot of different opportunities. So that's kind of the perspective that I bring, having worked abroad and dealt with a lot of international colleagues at work.
Okay, great. So we've got two very different backgrounds here. So Erica, I'm assuming from the US. Had you been abroad at all before you had the opportunity to work abroad, or what made you interested in that? And tell us a little bit about how Emerson's program, or how that worked out for you to be in Sydney, but then also be in all these other locations.
Yeah, sure. So I guess for me, the thing that really got me interested in traveling abroad and living abroad was food. I really I enjoy eating different food, and I had a mentor at one of my jobs, and I remember him telling me his favorite cuisine was Asian food. And I remember thinking, well, how can that be a cuisine? Like there's not that much variety in it, right? And so over that experience, having talked to my mentor, we tried all these different restaurants and different food, and I realized how much diversity and variety there is. And I just wanted to keep learning more, which kind of led me to saying, yeah, I want to move to China, to Singapore, and let's do it. So a little simple thing is food.
That's a good, United States isn't known for their food quite as much, other than maybe hot dogs or hamburgers. So I think that's a reason to try out some other places. I do want to get back to you a little bit more to hear about kind of how that worked out with that experience. But before we do that, Nick, I'm curious, to hear a little bit more about you, because I know you said you grew up or you were born in Colombia, moved here. So what was the cultural differences from there to here, but then also what led you to take those service trips while you were in college? And then also, I'm asking a few questions here, so I can come back to them, but when you were deciding on a company to work for, obviously TI is a very global company. Did that have a play in your decision?
Definitely. So I'd say the first one, moving from Colombia to Florida, I was going to say it's not a big impact for anybody who might have been to South Florida, the Miami-Dade area. There's a big Latino population down there. So in high school, a lot of my friends, they knew Spanish. They were from across Latin America. Jokingly, but even it's true, some teachers in high school, when they couldn't explain something in English, they would explain it in Spanish, just because so many people already knew the language there. So I didn't have that much of a culture shock coming from Colombia to Miami. I will say, hands down, I did have a culture shock going from Miami, South Florida to Columbus, Ohio. It was completely different. I'd say back then, I had a very thick accent that people could definitely say you're not from Ohio. Why would you come from lovely Miami, Florida to Ohio? They would think it was Miami, Ohio, which I didn't know about until I moved to Ohio State. But yeah, I did have a culture shock. It was a lot of adaptation in a way. Something that I like about Ohio State is that it's so big that I found my niche of friends. So I joined an organization called SHIP, which is the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. So there I found that home away from home, but I also got friends from across different nationalities and backgrounds. What led me to go on the service trips? So in college, I was a humanitarian engineering minor. So for that program, you had to take at least one service learning trip. And that's what led me to going. Using engineering for the betterment of society and communities was something that was close to my heart, just coming from Colombia, where you see a good amount of hardship. So that's how I got involved with humanitarian engineering, and then decided on going to those service learning trips. Which funny enough, like Erica mentioned, the second one where we went to Colombia, we went to a specific area of the country where the delicacy of food, and I'm sorry if there's any vegans in here, is guinea pig. So we actually ate guinea pig, and it was interesting seeing a lot of my other friends who were on that trip that had now left the U.S. Now they're eating guinea pig. So I found those experiences to be great. I actually wanted to do a third one to India, I believe in 2018 or 2017, but unfortunately something happened where it got canceled. And yeah, I did enjoy those that were spring break ones, because one, you still get credits for engineering. It helps your GPA. Yeah, you don't have the traditional college spring break where you go to a beach or something like that. But I did it my freshman year and sophomore year, so I wasn't even legal drinking age to go party it up somewhere. So I did enjoy it, and those were actually what brought me or what highlighted my resume in a way when I went to talk to employers my sophomore year when I was looking for internships. That was something that was a good talking point, and something that I struggled with freshman and sophomore years, and I know a lot of students in that time also struggle with, is not having experience. But being in certain organizations, doing those type of trips shows employers, they show recruiters that you know how to work in teams, that you know how to accomplish goals, how to communicate properly. So I want to say that experience itself helped me achieve my first internships as an engineering student. And then your last question about what brought me to Texas Instruments, I'd say it was more on what they do. So in electrical engineering, we have to take different flavors of electrical engineering, if I'd have to say that, from power to electromagnetism to semiconductors. And although my bachelor's and my master's was not on the semiconductors realm, where Texas Instruments would fall under, when I took those classes, I was just fascinated that there's companies out there producing things that would be smaller than your fingerprints, and that go pretty much on a lot of things, from cell phones to any electronic. And now that we're going into this Internet of Things, companies and people are putting more sensors, and more electronics are getting smaller and smaller. So that, I'll be honest, blew my mind. And that's what I wanted to be part of out of college. So I joined Texas Instruments, and I've been here for a year and a half, and I've had a great experience.
Erica, to go back and talk about your experience with Emerson, you had mentioned that sort of they came to you and said, would you like to go abroad to Shanghai and to China? And you said, yep. Sounded like you jumped all in on that opportunity. Was that something that you knew about when you were being recruited to the company out of undergrad? And sort of to go off of that as well, with your different experiences being in Sydney, Ohio, and also in Asia, what were those cultural experiences like? I mean, did you see sort of that culture shock of being in a small town, Ohio, sort of manufacturing, and then being in China and Shanghai, and sort of how did you navigate that?
Yeah, so I guess answering your first question first, the program that I committed to when I joined Emerson did include the international assignment in Singapore. So I did know that I was signing up for that. And at that point, I had started learning Mandarin because in my mind, it was one of the official languages of Singapore. And um, it would be helpful for me to start learning it, right? When I actually got to Singapore, I realized, okay, they all also speak English. So no one's going to talk to me in Mandarin. So at that point, that's when I asked to go to China from work. So it wasn't something that I committed to beforehand. But I think there's a lot of rotational programs or different entry-level programs these days that do have an international assignment included in them. So if someone's interested, they can definitely look for that in a company. Or a lot of people, what they do is after 5 years, 10 years with a company, then they take that role. For me, I think the biggest culture shock things are really around communication. So in the US, we use a lot of idioms and a lot of idioms about sports, right? Like, oh, we're going to get a home run on this one. Let's go for the Hail Mary. But outside of the US, people don't watch American football. They don't know what a Hail Mary is. So I think that's something that I really took away, that you have to watch what you say and how you communicate. The other thing that I think in the US we're so used to is reading tones, right? If I were to say, that's okay, like what I really mean is no, like I don't want that, right? Whereas I was in Singapore and I was getting my face, like a facial done, and the lady was like, hey, do you want me to do your eyebrows? I was like, that's okay. And she started shaving my eyebrows off because she interpreted me saying, oh, that is okay, like go ahead. So for me, I think it's always been these little communication differences that I found really fascinating, and really a part of the bigger part of cultural barriers, because these little things, they add up over time, right? And then you misunderstand one thing, and then that turns into this bigger issue. So it's part of the challenge, but also part of the fun, I guess.
And Nick, you sort of talked about your experience of being a humanitarian engineering minor, and I know we have many students that choose to go the route of the HE minor, or perhaps they're an HE scholar, or maybe they're interested in picking up that minor. Did you see that? I mean, obviously, that impacted your decision to go on these service learning programs, to go abroad and to sort of further that. Do you see that in your work right now at TI? Do you bring any of those experiences with you, specifically from your humanitarian engineering scholarship, and into the work that you're doing?
I'd say not directly, if that makes any sense. Not specifically to my role. It does bring great talking points where companies such as TI has these volunteering events, where a lot of people from the company have this passion for volunteering and giving back to the community, where you start sharing those experiences that you've had, and you meet other people that have gone to other countries to done similar work. I'd say it has helped me broaden my network here at TI. But apart from that, just like working with teams and solving problems that you would never think of. So for example, the first one that I did was the Montaña de Luz trip, which was an orphanage for kids with HIV and AIDS in Honduras. That's something like clean water that a lot of people here in the States would not think of as an issue. Which Texas had to live through, like 3 weeks ago when we got hit with the with the storm, that we wouldn't have to think of. How do you solve those type of problems? So that mindset of thinking outside of the box would be one of those things that when my machines are down or I'm trying to troubleshoot, trying to say, okay, what else can we do? So I'd say that's how it directly impacts my line of work.
Nick, I want to go back to the point that you made a little bit earlier about those experiences broadening or helping your resume, because I meet with quite a few students who want to either intern abroad or just get that experience abroad, and then it's okay, what what is that going to do to boost the resume, or what do employers see by that? And I think a lot of people underestimate the power of just simply a spring break trip. Like you said, it doesn't necessarily need to be an entire summer that you're working abroad to kind of get some of those things that are interesting to employers on a resume and the skills that you're learning. So thanks for bringing that up, because I love to hear that. I did want to ask, you mentioned being on teams and having to communicate well. In your role, are you communicating and working with people that are in different countries and different time zones? And what is that like? What are things that you have to think through? I mean, I'm thinking of cultural barriers, language barriers, time zone barriers. So what is that like for you in your role?
Yeah, definitely. So like I mentioned, I'm in the manufacturing side of Texas Instruments. So we have manufacturing facilities across the world. And something that we have is a one make mentality, where groups within each factory, since the semiconductor processing fabrication is like very similar, the same groups are in different factories, where we have one make meetings every month, where all the factories get together and say, hey, we're having this issues. And people are like, yeah, we've seen that. This is how we solve it. Those meetings are at 6 a.m. in the morning. They're not the funnest, but the working from home has made it a little bit better, where my commute is only from bed to my desk, and we don't have cameras, so I can be in a hoodie and nobody nobody knows that Nick is in a hoodie. But apart from that, I'm actually transitioning to my second role, since I'm in the rotational program with Texas Instruments, where my first project is a new tool installation for our gallium nitride line. So our vendors are in Hungary and in England. So working with them on the tools and, okay, when is it going to ship, and trying to think of all those logistics, and then thinking, okay, when are we going to be there? When are we going to be able to install them? Although it's been challenging, I'd say my experiences, either from my internships or the study abroad, definitely has helped me with this. Maybe we can meet through a meeting where we can actually have these conversations, but more on the email side. But yeah, that's been my experience abroad. So actually, one of my tools from Hungary arrived today, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it to the meeting, but it did arrive today, and then the engineers are going to be getting here next week for the install. So yeah, I'm looking forward to growing my network with people from other countries.
Is working globally something that you're interested in the future, and would that be an option for you at TI?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say my long-term goal would be hopefully to go back to South America, to have like a better impact, just because that's where I was born and that's where I grew up. So that's like my long-term goal. Whether it's with TI or not, that's up in the air in a way, my 10-year plan. But at Texas Instruments, those opportunities are there if people would want to go to factories across the ocean. It's more, are the opportunities there, and language barriers. So I know, for example, one of my coworkers, he's actually moving to Europe, and he has a position now in the Germany factory. So yeah, those opportunities are there. It's just whether or not you want to pick up and move across the world.
And I guess that brings me then to the next point, which I think we're all thinking about right now, is just COVID and the current pandemic that we are hopefully getting close to the end to. But could you both, with your perspectives and your jobs, talk about how it did when it first started and how it currently has affected you? Let's start with Erica.
Yeah, sure. So I was living in China when when COVID was discovered. So that was very interesting for me. One, because I think we hear a lot about China and how their governments run. And so there I actually found out firsthand about COVID from a foreign newspaper. So it had not yet been published in any local media. Um, so that was very interesting because when you're working abroad, all of a sudden there's this thing that comes in and you're like, how am I going to get home? Or for me, I was on Chinese New Year vacation. So I was in Costa Rica and I was trying to figure out, am I going back to the US? Am I going to China? What does that look like? So from a life perspective, obviously that impacts you living abroad, working abroad. But then too, I think from a business perspective, it makes it that much more important to check in on your teams. And also a lot of times we tend to give people in Asia evening meetings, or in the Middle East, their holy days aren't always on Sunday, right? So they tend to have meetings on Fridays, which is one of their holy days, because we're so used to working on Fridays, right? So I think having COVID around, you have to be more intentional about these things, and make sure that your teammates, your suppliers, everyone that you're working with is doing okay, and you're not pushing them too hard. But then also look forward, be forward looking in your business. So for us, our supply chain, all of our parts come from China. So when we're trying to get them to different plants, that obviously creates issues, because now they can't, or even some of our products are used in medical industries, right? So now those are in high demand, when before maybe we were making different products. So it definitely impacts business and life. Um, yeah.
Yeah, to follow Erica, I'd say being in manufacturing, we 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 never stopped producing wafers. And for this, so this is what we produce in semiconductors. This is what we make, and then these get cut up really, really, really small, smaller than my fingerprint, and then go on chips and go everything. So we never stopped producing these. So I'd say, although we were working from home, I go to the factory at a minimum 3 times a week. So just making sure we have the safety protocols, because then we get notified on, hey, a person in the building or in this group got COVID, and then your entire team is now quarantined, which happened early on with the outbreak, that there was a lot of people. And then you have to figure out, okay, I don't have any technicians, or I don't have any operators. So I know for about 2 weeks, I was working as an operator, just because we couldn't just stop the line, if that were to make any sense. So I was going in to run material, and for me, it gave me a better understanding for how the factory runs. Although I would consider I made it into the factory a good amount of time before COVID hit. If I'm at work, I'm in the factory now. If I have to do presentations or emails and stuff, I'll try to do it at home. So I just go straight into the factory. But yeah, COVID, although it has been an impact, and like Erica mentioned, getting our parts, talking to our suppliers, or even talking to the factories in China and across the world, it's been big. I know some friends, they haven't been into the offices in over a year. But yeah, in the manufacturing side, since we can't just stop, we have to keep on going, if that makes sense.
A question that I was thinking that I have for both of you, and Erica, you spoke about intentionality, and it's evident that both of you have been successful in your respective careers, that you went from being an OSU student to now being successful in the industry. Oftentimes we tell students, to leverage their talents or leverage the experiences that they had here at Ohio State. And both of you had, very unique experiences that helped you launch to that next point in your career post-graduation. So how, could you speak on sort of leveraging your experiences and those skills, and perhaps what advice you would give to students who want to be in your position, maybe 3-4 years down the road? How can they start leveraging those experiences now as a student still in the classroom here in Columbus?
Yeah, so I think of a few things. First, I'd say get involved in student organizations. I think that's one of the things that did me the biggest help, is just that leadership experience. But then too, if you're interested in working abroad, or getting to know different cultures, there's a lot of organizations out there that do celebrate that, and want to honor certain cultures, or styles of dance, or types of food, right? So you could definitely look out for those and join them. The other thing that I think of is looking to either study abroad, or do a similar service trip like Nicola did, or Nick did. um, because I think those perspectives too are very interesting, because you pick up on little things that you wouldn't think, oh, right, it's not US dollars. I'm talking about pounds or euros, or, oh, right, I need a different charger type, right? Like they don't use the same plug that we do in the US. Those little things, if you notice those now or sooner, then it makes some of the bigger things that much easier to handle, because you're not worried about which plug or which currency do I need, and instead you're worried about, how do I communicate with my colleagues? How do I better, minimize any cultural difference so I can be effective in my job?
Yeah, so I would definitely agree with Erica on student organizations. Those would be a big reason why I got my first internships. And shout out to ECS, not gonna lie. That office was what allowed me to get all my internships. But yeah, student organizations show that you're a leader within your community. So, and when I say student organizations, don't just show up for the free pizza or the free canes that they might offer. Show up and get involved in whatever they might be that hopefully aligns with your passions. So it might be a competitive team, or it might be a community service organization. Find what you like and join that organization. You'll grow your network, and hopefully you can impact either the Ohio State community or the Columbus community, or even, like Erica mentioned, there's some organizations that have a bigger reach that I know have trips across the world. The second one I'd say would be networking. Definitely those students, those colleagues that you have classes with, that you either might have a lab with, stay in touch if that makes sense. You don't have to become best friends, but Ohio State is a well-renowned university, that those people that you're sitting right next in your fluids class and your electronics class are gonna go work for a big company. They might even go start your own company. So you never know what will happen. I'm a true believer that it's not what you know, but who you know in life that will get you places. So definitely add them on LinkedIn. Stay in touch. Yeah, because you never know when your paths might reach. And then I know I had a third one, and I wrote down the spot here, but I never actually wrote it down. Yeah, if it comes back to me, I'll let you know. But I know I had 3 arrows, and I wrote 2 down. But yeah, we can keep going.
Yeah, so I guess I thought of another thing. If you're interested in a particular culture, I would recommend that you start learning their language, because I think a lot of roles too will have requirements for that. So China, for example, I've been learning Mandarin for now 4 years, and it's been very helpful for me. And I think a lot of employers, even in the US, if they're working with suppliers in China or customers in China, right, they might be looking for that skill, or that's something that you can leverage and say, hey, I know that you guys are a global organization. I really care about this, or I'm really interested in this language, and I'd love to work more with those types of customers or suppliers, and help the business out that way. I think that's another easy thing to do, and you can get a whole bunch of free apps or do it on the internet with no cost, right?
So I did think of which one was the one I was going to talk about, and it's the professors and classes at OSU. So my friends at times make fun of me because we know that there's those easy classes. It's an ECA type thing. I was the type of guy that I would pick the class that I found interesting, if that makes any sense. It at times it was rough passing those classes, but it was interesting. And Ohio State has well-renowned professors from various backgrounds that definitely try to get to know your professor, not only because you want that good grade, and you think if they know your name, you're going to get an A, but they have a lot of experience from across the world, and they can definitely shape your professional career. So if it weren't because I found that semiconductors was very interesting and I wouldn't have taken more classes of that, I don't think I would have been working for TI. My focus in undergrad and master's was power systems and control systems. But my senior year, I decided to do a 360 turn and go to semiconductors. And it was just because I took that one interesting class that I was like, yo, this is really cool. But yeah.
It's never too late to go another direction. And that's why internships and all classes, try it all out while you're in school so you can help be better informed for that decision. We do have a question in the Q&A, but before I ask that, I wanted to just ask Erica one more thing. You mentioned that Emerson had, it's a leadership, or I think a leadership development or rotational program that you're in, and that you knew applying to it that there would be a global component of that. Had you interned for them ahead of time, or how did you find the position? And then how early were you offered it? Because I know you said you had already started to try to learn some Mandarin. So what was that process like for that path for you?
Yeah, sure. So I interned with ExxonMobil, so not with Emerson. And I found the role through Engineering Career Services and actually the career fair in the fall, and got the offer in the fall. So I think if people are interested, they should definitely be not only waiting till the spring career fair, but also leverage the fall career fair as well. And look at all the job postings. I would have never thought that I would have enjoyed or worked at Emerson if you would have asked me 10 years ago, right? And then I saw the job posting, and that's kind of changed my path. So if that's something you want, if you want to work abroad, I think you can, again, be very intentional about it and seek out those positions because they are there. And then just, yeah, make it known that you're interested and highlight the pros and cons, not the cons, the pros of why you'd be great for that role.
And Nick, your role, I heard you mention it's some sort of a development program. Is that right? So what does yours look like? I know it's not location moving around, so it's just areas within the company?
Yes, ma'am. So TI has multiple. So for example, if you're in applications or in sales, you might go to different offices. Their rotations are a lot shorter. So theirs are from 6 months to 8 months. I'm in the manufacturing side. So our rotations are anywhere between 18 to 24 months. So a lot longer. And your rotations are within the factory. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we've got 2 questions in the Q&A, so let's start getting to those, make sure we have time for these. So the first one, the question is, do you feel like study abroad would be helpful for someone who has lived and studied in another country? Like, for example, I was born and studied till middle school in another country, so I have a really good understanding of multiple cultures.
From my perspective, I think every culture is very unique. So I thought I knew, what different cultures were like after I was living in Singapore, and you come to China and it's completely different. So I don't think it would hurt you to do it. I think maybe I would just choose a culture that maybe is more distinct from the one that I am so familiar with if you're really looking to learn something new. Because if you go back to your home country, obviously a lot of you already know that, so I'm not sure how much you would take away compared to a different location.
And just to be the devil's advocate, I'll say the other side of Erica. So for example, like I mentioned, I went to Colombia, which was my home country. I don't think I would have ever gone to that area and eaten guinea pig if I were in Colombia, if that makes any sense. My region where I'm from, we eat ants. They taste like peanuts, I would like to say. But yeah, even but like Erica mentioned, you want to look for what's the opportunity. Maybe I wouldn't have gone if it's my home city. I knew this one was in a different side of the country that I had never gone to, and I found very appealing. But yeah, if you already have that experience in multiple cultures, I'd say use it to your advantage, to maybe either help those that you're traveling with, to how to ease them either to the culture or what it's like to travel outside of the US. I know in both trips that I went through Ohio State, I had people in our classes where they had never left the States, and it was a big leap for them. So definitely, I'd say take that to your advantage. That way you can impact other people's lives and you'll definitely learn something new.
Another question that was submitted, a student is asking, do you have any advice for someone seeking their first internship, especially given the circumstances around COVID and the pandemic?
This is a tough question because COVID makes so many things uncertain. I guess from my perspective, I feel like there's many ways you can go about getting a job, right? You can apply online, you could talk to the recruiter, you could do networking. And I think a lot of people, they tend to go towards just applying online, but that's also what everyone does. So, and a lot of application systems, they have, I guess, technology that looks for keywords and different things in your resume. So I would recommend that maybe you leverage some other techniques, reach out to people that you're interested in, ask them for advice, learn about the industry, try avenues, not just applying online, because I think everyone's applying online. So it's harder to differentiate yourself that way than if you actually talk to a person and show your true passion, which is part of why career fairs are so helpful. The other thing I would recommend is you take advantage of ECS. Obviously, they have companies that are reaching out that want to hire interns, and they even do, I guess now, remote career fairs. So I know I interviewed a whole bunch of people from Ohio State in the fall because they went through ECS and signed up for interview times or networking times. So I think those two methods could be very helpful.
Advice seeking first internships with the pandemic. Okay, so I'd say something that you should always be doing at OSU, or even when you're not at OSU, but while you're a student, is growing your resume, expand your resume. So, okay, maybe you did not get an internship after first year. I didn't get an internship my first year. Make sure that summer you're utilizing it wisely. Don't just stay binging Netflix or playing video games all day. Look for a part-time job, get ahead in school and take classes at a community college. Find volunteering opportunities. Always be expanding your resume. That way you can show that recruiter that you're someone that in a way doesn't just sit around and wait for things to either come to them or for the next thing to come. So always be expand your resume would be my first one. And then the second one, although coronavirus times have been hard, I think it shows a different perspective of companies and who you might to work after graduation. It was heartbreaking this past summer. Every time I would go on LinkedIn and the posts were, oh, my internship got canceled, or hey, I was gonna work at X company, they took away the offer. So it shows what companies are willing to flip the script and, okay, let's do virtual internships. That's something that I was proud of with Texas Instruments. Our summer or 2020 interns was all virtual. So I'm not saying just because a company canceled an internship, they're a bad company, no, because it's an unprecedented times. But it just shows you companies that might be a little bit stable market, different things. Because again, this is the first time for many, depending on where you get your news or what articles you're reading, it might happen again sometime soon. So it opens your eyes at where companies' priorities are, and it also makes you think that nothing's for certain. I have a lot of my friends here in the DFW area where they logged off of work on one day and the next day they had an email, hey, sorry, we're letting you go. It was just like that. I was like, that actually happens. But yeah, it's a reality. And that's why I always, and I say it again, it's not what you know, but who you know. So having that friend who you know is a recruiter at this company or that works at this company that can connect you with somebody else is always important in this era that we're now living with this uncertainty. But yeah, to answer your original question would be my first answer. Always be expanding your resume. If it's not through professional engineering experience, there's always, like I mentioned, my service learning trip, I'd say would be what allowed me to get my first internship. So volunteering, student organizations, getting ahead in classes, that's how you can get your first internships.
I would agree with everything they both said. Just to put myself in here from ECS, I put a document in the chat, and it's, I mean, Nick, you could have read it because everything that's in this document you just mentioned, but it was something we created actually last summer when a lot of students had offers rescinded or just weren't able to find internships because companies stopped hiring. And it was all the other things that you can do to build your experience, build your resume, from courses you can take to volunteer work, to personal projects, to micro internships are pretty big right now, as well as kind of externships and just little mini projects that you can do for companies. So that document has a lot of those different things linked, as well as just tips for other things you can do. And exactly what Nick said, and I work with a lot of employers in my job, and they want to see that, you know, just because you didn't have an internship, you weren't sitting around watching Netflix all day. Like, what were you doing over the summer? And that matters. And it's not going to hurt any student who did not have something in the summer of 2020 and probably also summer 2021. Everyone, we're all here. We're not living under a rock. So employers know what happened. They understand, and it's not going to look bad to have those gaps on your resume. But again, just be thinking about what are other things that you could potentially be doing then during that time to better yourself or better your community and others.
Well, I know we've got about 5-10 more minutes. So if there's any other questions from our student attendees, please do chat them in. I am going to, I have a sort of one final question that I was going to pose to both Erica and Nick. In, excuse me, in terms of where you see the field moving forward, and I guess, you know, considering COVID and your own experiences both abroad and domestically, sort of what do you see as the future with your line of work? And I know, you know, Erica, if you want to speak to what you saw in China and sort of where we are in the US, you know, are we ahead or are we behind? But how do you see us sort of moving forward and taking that next step once we do hopefully come out of this pandemic here shortly?
Okay, I don't know if I would say we're ahead or behind. I think that's a very, it treats the question as black and white, and I think it's just very different, right? I think in China, they move really quickly. They advance technology very quickly, but also, now this is not representative of every person, but I tend to get the impression that a lot of times they're looking for a solution. They're not looking for the optimal solution. And that's part of what enables them to move so quickly, right? It's kind of a trade-off. Whereas I think in the US it's very different, where we're looking for that best solution, like of all these 20 options, which one do we go for? But obviously that adds time, right? So I think it's just two very different types of development. I'd say overall, there's a lot of common threads though. The way you do drawings, all those CAD drawings you had to do your freshman year, they still do that no matter where you are, right? And just the engineering design process, you know, thinking about something, like understanding the problem, hypothesizing, iterating on whatever solution to make it better, that's still consistent. So it's hard to say like post-COVID what will happen, but I think it'll definitely be interesting to see at least.
To answer the question of where the industry might be going, um, specifically in the semiconductor industry, electronics are getting smaller and smaller, and they need to be able to perform better and better. So that's where it's going. Texas Instruments is investing heavily in what's called gallium nitride technology, which is high power technology. For example, those are the ones that we sell to Tesla for their electric vehicles. But just to echo what Erica said, I would say more than the technical aspect of each industry or each role comes the problem solving of what engineers actually do. As engineers, we're problem solvers. Although I know when I heard it first time in orientation or when a professor said it, I thought it was so cheesy. And now I'm here using it. But yeah, engineers, we are problem solvers, and the world is not perfect and problems keep arising. For some reason, I was doing laundry not too long ago and I could think like Tide Pods. The person that designed Tide Pods would have never imagined, okay, what if a bunch of kids start eating these things? That's a problem. They have to find a solution. And just like that, everything that you might design, you might work on, might fail in the long run, might not fail. So problems are always going to be there. It's just how well, how fast, how safely you're able to solve them. So that will always be here, no matter what industry you work in.
Yeah, so I'd add to that. He said problems are always going to be there, which means you're always going to need engineers. So if anyone's having a hard time, don't quit. Keep going. I think it's so easy to think, oh, this is so hard, and all of a sudden I think you can do it, and it makes a difference too. In my company, at least, engineers are in every role. I'm in marketing right now, right? I didn't do a business degree. I did an engineering degree. Same with supply chain, quality, sales. There's engineers that are doing sales too. So I think you can definitely leverage your degree no matter where you want to go.
Great answers. I know that was a broad question, so I appreciate those answers. One thing I will mention, Katie had shared some resources with ECS. I'll just speak from the Ed Abroad side. Even though we are not currently traveling at this moment, we do hope to resume international travel as soon as the university deems safe. So certainly those international service learning programs that both Nick and Erica were talking about, we were looking forward to that day that we can travel again and have those opportunities. But just because we can't travel doesn't mean that there aren't those opportunities here on campus. So we are still having ways that students can engage, this conversation being one of those. But I'm going to drop in the chat. We are actually going to be working with some alumni who are giving lectures, and this is open to alumni as well. So Erica and Nick, if you'd like to join. But we have two coming up this week, one on AI and another one on safety and technology. So feel free to join. And then Nick, I believe, had mentioned Internet of Things earlier in the conversation. We have a faculty from India that will be giving a lecture later in April on that topic. We don't have the event advertised just yet, but we'll send it out to those that attended. So I would encourage you to attend these events because these are ways to continue that international engagement. And I think, one lesson that I'm sort of taking away from this conversation with Erica and Nick is that, no matter the circumstances, we can always be doing something to better ourselves, whether that be, updating your resume or updating LinkedIn or, trying to get yourself out there. That there's always ways to be doing even the smallest of thing to really positioning yourself to be in the best possible situation. That way, when that internship or that job interview comes along, you can show and say, these are all the things that I've been doing. Yes, COVID-19 and 2020 was a crazy year, but these are the ways that I was able to stay engaged. So I would highly encourage you to attend those events, but also look at other events that I know ECS is having, the College of Engineering and OSU as a whole, because we really are trying to create some meaningful events for our students. Katie, did you have anything to close us out?
No, thank you all so much. This was really enlightening and just so interesting, and it makes me excited to travel abroad again and have those opportunities. And maybe I'll get to eat guinea pig. Was that what it was? Someday. I don't think it's on my bucket list, but maybe. So thank you all so much for attending, and thank you to Erica and Nick for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us.